The preceding program is a paid advertisement. The opinions and views expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of AM 620 WSNR or its management.
This is AM 620 WSNR, Jersey City.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been broken.
Good afternoon, good evening. This is Dove Tusman. You're back on equal footing. This is our 201st show. And I missed the milestone of 200 last week, so I wanted to mention it. What an incredible journey it's been over these almost 5 years together. Thank you, listeners, for being a part of this experience and continuing to uplift each other, educate me, and it's been an opportunity to connect with so many great souls on air. One of those great souls, kind of our resident spiritual guide, is on with us again tonight. He's been a regular, appearing at least a couple times each year we've been on the air, Rabbi Yaakov Bankhalter. I consider him to be a brother, a friend, a mentor. Rabbi Bankhalter is a Chabad emissary. He's been the co-director of Chabad Loft in recent years. He was the founder and director for decades prior to that. Chabad Loft, if you don't know about it, is a vibrant Jewish community center located in Lower Manhattan. Welcomes New Yorkers and also visitors from around the world, quite close to NYU. Rabbi Yaakov and his wife Avital are dedicated to fostering Jewish engagement among young professionals and students in particular. Rabbi Bankhalter, Rabbi Yaakov as I'll often call him, so interchangeable. He's actively involved in educational programming, Torah classes, Shabbat dinners, holiday events, all aimed at deepening participants' connection to Jewish traditions and values. He also engages in quite a bit of personal outreach and support. He helps individuals explore and strengthen their Jewish identity, navigate difficult times, celebrate revealed blessings. Rabbi Yaakov's work is marked by a commitment to inclusivity and warmth and community building. Rabbi Yaakov, welcome back.
So, I can say I come on the show just because I'm feeling low about myself. You always make me feel better with the introductions. So thank you for the introduction.
That's my role. A lot better. I want everyone to feel better.
And by the way, I just want to say, this hour goes by so fast. I wish my hour in the gym went as fast as this hour goes by.
Well, tonight there's a lot to cover. Rabbi, you and I have a very close friend in common who lost, in blessed memory, his sister the other day, and the funeral was today. And we had other programming on, which we're going to push to next week, and we felt inspired tonight to talk about this last stage in our soul's journey, the death portal, as it were, the ceremonies, the rites and rituals around it in Judaism, but not just those customs and rituals. I do want to talk about that tonight, but the deeper meaning around them and our soul's journey in that last doorway of our life in this physical world. I want to start by asking you to help demarcate for us when in Jewish wisdom does that last stage begin? Is it in the dying process? Is it the last breath? Is it the interment of the body after death? When does this last phase begin in Jewish mysticism?
I'm sorry, trying to understand. We say last stage of physical life. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
This is I don't want to sound very morbid, but actually, according to the Talmud, it states that a person starts to die the second they're born. It doesn't mean literally that that's the last stage, but death is a process. Really, on some level, begins the moment the soul enters the body, But I don't know if the right word is to say death portal or death. It's more the journey of the soul into this physical world, and then, of course, the journey of the soul in the world, and then the journey of the soul as it leaves this physical world. I would kind of really, I think it's the only way we can look at this journey really is by really understanding the Torah mystical approach to what is a human being in general, which is, or what is the essence of a human, what is the essence of a person? And that really is their soul. Now, what is that soul? That is their essential energy, which is that true, pure life. In Hebrew, one of the words for soul is neshama, which means breath. It's also described in mystical texts as pure life. So every human being, their pure essence is essentially pure life. Death is imposed on the soul because there's a body, which a body is not pure life. A body is actually corporeal, physical being. Life is given to the body through the soul. So really it's about the soul's journey, or the soul's life journey as it begins to become part of, it starts out in this world at birth, and then the child is born. A child is so pure because it's, at that point, it's like the soul just entered the body. So it's very much at that point, a person's life, when they begin, it's like as if they're so close to that original stage of just pure life before it entered the physical world. So it's to a certain degree, it's painful for a soul to come into the world, and it's a transitional state. Goes through early stages, and then it becomes more and more invested in its physical body, more invested in the world, it develops into its personality, characteristics, becomes part of its life. And then leaving is kind of almost like the opposite of being born. It's now going back. And that transition starts when, the whole reason Judaism for sickness is actually the idea that a soul begins to become less and less powerful in the body as it was in its time when it was at its most prevalent state, and it starts to, as we age, our soul becomes less attached to the body.
I want to pause there for a second. The subtitle for this week's show was a soul's journey, and in Judaism, then that neshama, that purest essence of our being, that breath, it predates and postdates our body, yes?
Definitely.
And
that's what I would like to say.
Do we believe in Judaism in
reincarnation?
Do we believe in reincarnation then? Was our neshama inhabiting a previous body?
Definitely.
And I don't want to get too far off the...
I didn't know that we believe in reincarnation. I'm like, we invented it.
Yeah. I think it's really great for especially secularized Jews to hear that, because often it's almost as coming home. You kind of wander out and get into metaphysics and Eastern philosophy and so forth, and then you kind of come back realizing some of these principles were resonant in our tradition, in our wisdom, in our faith since the beginning. The concept, I don't want to get too matrixy here, but is chronology of soul and body and habitation, so to speak, is it traditional in time bound as in the physical world? So was my neshama inhabiting a soul, prior to this body, and then prior to that body, and prior to that body, in the traditional sense of time through the ages, or is it somehow more complicated than that?
It's a little bit of both, because there's a reality which we inhabit. So where there's time, physical time, and the time that we are aware of, minute by minute, constantly flowing, in the dates and the years, and that's what we experience in this world as a year, as a lifetime, as 20 years. But in higher worlds of existence, time is different. As we were discussing earlier, to use the analogy, a movie analogy from Interstellar, in different worlds, time functions very differently. And that's the way we understand higher worlds. Time is very different in a higher world and a higher reality than it is in this world. So the way that I understand it and all of the learning that I have done is that we have to, on one hand, be aware, we can't deny our own physical reality and be aware of the limits and the reality of time and space in the physical world, but we also have to recognize that the soul in its essence is not bound to these rules and laws. It's right now inhibiting a body which has these rules of time and space, and that's why God gives us mitzvahs in time and space. But at the same time, there are different, you could call them different levels to the soul or different aspects of the soul which remain in higher worlds or are already, even as we're born, according to Kabbalistic and Torah knowledge, the essence of the soul, the majority of the soul, is not even part of this world. We only experience a level of consciousness which is almost like one end of a rope that's bound to this world, but there's a higher part of the rope that's in a different reality where time and space is different. So people who are very in tune, it's very rare to find people like that, but people who are very in tune and very and in touch with that deeper part of their soul could theoretically experience that world and travel into that world and feel what life is like outside of the confines of what we perceive as physical reality.
So I'm going to let us flow in this metaphysical space for a couple more minutes before I take our first break, and then I want to come back to that, what happens in our physical world at death, and how these points of view and metaphysics inform the rites and rituals around death. But first, let's flow for a minute more here. One of the things that you hear about as a Jewish person around death and birth is that a child is often the neshama, the soul of that child in a family often is coming from an ancestor. And I don't know if that's something that's a customary saying or whether that's really part of Kabbalistic or mystical Jewish wisdom. Can you inform us?
Oh, you're saying that a child born to certain parents can be part of those particular parents' ancestors. They're reborn into individuals. You're saying that's the question you're asking? Yeah,
I guess. I mean, that's the narrative or the idea that I have.
I don't know. I've never heard that.
That my grandparents used to talk about it, especially in the context of my mother's line losing so many, almost the entire line in the Holocaust, and so this idea that in the generations that follow, that those neshamot, those souls would kind of live on or re-inhabit the same ancestral line.
Well, I think when we understand reincarnation, you have to also understand that a person, as we know ourselves to be in this world, made up of many memories and experiences and feelings, is not necessarily meaning that when you were reincarnated, you were the same exact individual in the previous life. Because part of us, our individuality, is part of our experiences in this world. Right. It's more your soul essence is what was in this world before. So it's not the person we know ourselves to be when we're 25, 30, or went to elementary school here, had these parents.
Sure.
It's quite different.
Sure. But some sort of essential ingredient.
There is a lot of talk about when a soul comes into this world and the parents that they give birth to this child are very much connected to that soul. If two souls give birth to one soul, then there's a shared mission that they have together. Maybe even what you call the shared tikkun. Rectifying something. The fact that obviously is a deeper connection on a metaphysical level between parents and children. I've heard many mystical people claim that our generation are very much our reincarnated souls of those who passed away in the Holocaust.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel that way. And part of our generation's kind of rectifying in a different way what they went through and experienced their own experiences in this world. There's a lot of thoughts, ideas out there, but one thing for sure you could say is that we are definitely, every person in this world inhabiting a body is a clear reincarnation of another soul that had come into this world before, and we are back in this world with a particular mission to rectify something that goes back from a previous lifetime. Definitely. Everyone.
Rabbi, I like to think of the idea that you and I are neshamot, represent the physical manifestations of neshamot that have connected in previous lifetimes. That just brought a smile to my face. We're here with Rabbi Yaakov Bankhalter, a wonderful, practical, and also brings great nuance in understanding as a guide around Jewish mysticism and Jewish wisdom. We're talking tonight about this last stage of this physical body, death, and the guardianship of the body, which we're going to talk about afterwards as well, Shemira, and afterwards, of course, the burial and sitting Shiva, the mourning and grieving period, all the way to the first anniversary of the passing of a beloved soul, the Yartzeit, as we call it in Judaism. Tough stuff, but of course, just part of life. Life and death are one thread, the same line viewed from different sides. Please participate. Talk to us about your experiences on the passing of loved ones. Ask any questions that you've wanted to know on this topic. You can participate by calling in live, 718-303-9090. We're here on the air until 8 p.m. Eastern at 718-303-9090. And you can also text or WhatsApp in a question or comment to Rabbi Yaakov. The number is 917-428-4062. That's 917-428-4062. And we'll be right back.
And to know you is hard. We wonder. To know you all wrong. We wonder.
Such a beautiful song, The Funeral by a Band of Horses. Recently, my wife, now wife, told me that when we were dating, that I put on that song, and it's one of her favorite songs, and she knew at that moment that our neshamot were meant to be together, which kind of brings tears to my eyes as I say it, and I didn't know that until she recently shared that with me. Okay. Transition. This show has been brought to you for years by Mechanical Art Capital. Mechanical Art Capital is a business I know very well, and it's very simple. It provides you overnight, max 2 days cash for your watches or your jewelry collection or inventory if you're a dealer. And you don't have to actually part with it, and you're not getting a loan. Mechanical Art Capital employs a halachically sound financing approach. That's a buyback approach. You can buy your inventory or your collection back at any time. The financial cost is quite low, and it's very reasonable and easy to access. Go on your smartphone to the App Store and put in 3 words, Mechanical, space art, space capital, Mechanical Art Capital. You upload a couple of photos or videos of your watches, your jewelry, and you get a bid, an indicative bid right away, and you can have money in your pocket as early as the next day. You can also go to their website, mechanicalartcapital.com.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on to. I've been taught, but I'm keeping on.
Rabbi, I always feel privileged when you're on. I feel like I should be like paying you for this knowledge. I just use the show as an excuse to learn from you. I want to talk about as a Jew, almost all of us, nearly all of us at some point will go through the process of mourning and grieving. And as is true across every aspect of our life, there is so much halacha, Jewish law, and Jewish custom. And often, especially when it comes to these difficult moments, I find we're shy to ask about that custom. Some of us live our whole lives knowing what we're supposed to do in a given scenario, but not knowing why. And around death, there's a lot of that. There are a lot of rites and rituals in our faith. So I want to start by in the dying process, when we know it's near or at the end of a loved one's life in their physical manifestation, their physical body, what are we to do? Is it like in other faiths where we kind of call a rabbi to administer last rites? Do we sit in silence? Do we pray? If we pray, what prayers should we recite? What are the kind of do's and don'ts in those moments?
Well, there are special prayers that you find in certain prayer books that are meant to be said if someone happens to know that it's near death. One of those prayers is, of course, the Shema, which is the essential prayer of Judaism, which is acknowledging God's unity, that regardless of what our eyes perceive, we understand that the truth is that everything is one, Hashem is one, which is, if a person does know that they're about to pass away, they're supposed to say the Shema. There's also certain prayers concerning the idea of letting go of any anger, resentment, blame, forgiving. I remember there was once.
Are those letting go prayers ones that we should recite around our loved one, or one that one, or prayers that one should recite at the end of one's own life?
Yeah, kind of like
both.
I don't want to say like a confession. It's more like a meaningful, not confession. I guess in what I would think is a traditional Christian sense. It's more like a real honest accounting as much as you can to let go and say things out loud that you feel that you want forgiveness for. Obviously, if a person does have other people in their lives that they want to get forgiveness for, I mean, it's always good to do that. It doesn't have to be, God forbid, the last moment. Right. But there's a lot of talk in the Torah about those last moments that a person really feels. It's not just a feeling of fear, oh no, what's going to happen to me, but, obviously when you're in life and death, the truth of who you are, what your life really represents comes out. So those are special moments to really, obviously they're meaningful, and like let's say the futile stupidity of life that we get focused on in those moments, we want to get really focused on what really counts, in those moments. So, but mainly
when we were at the sorry for the interruption, Rabbi, when we were at this funeral today, this Jewish funeral, as we were walking away, my wife said, people should go to more funerals. And I know what she meant. She didn't mean, of course, that God forbid that more people should die around us, but that you're at a funeral, and the ephemeral nature of life is clear, but also the illusion of what's important and what we think is important is very easily stripped away.
Totally. You see the person for who they truly are. We forget. I always say to myself, as a rabbi, you meet a lot of people, especially a Chabad rabbi in Manhattan, and then the find out that a person passed away. I always say to myself, I wish I would have had one last moment with that person. I wish I would have valued their life. Yeah. I think the person's true essence comes out who they are. Even though, you get a person that, let's say, you weren't very fond of, but when they pass away, they somehow become, who they truly are matters more than those little things that we got caught up in. I mean, this week we saw that horrible tragedy in Israel and those 6 beautiful souls. I mean, people have been thinking about them, from 11 months, but still, those memories, those visions, those moments, and that woman spoke out about her son was incredible. How powerful that was.
Yeah,
she said to mine.
The rabbi that gave the sermon today at the funeral, you may know him, Rabbi Yosef Biston from Parkland, Chabad of Parkland in Florida, and he was describing this woman's life, and he said that she had achieved her mission, which was a memory and a connection with people that was about love and charity and giving, and in those moments you don't tend to hear eulogies and sermons about the professional achievements and these things that often we spend so much of our life on, but the love and connection is what it's all about.
Yeah, we get caught up in stupidity. Oh, that person cut me in line, or they cut me off in the car, but in that moment you lot of good in them. We overlook that. In the moment of death, we realize that.
Let's move forward a little bit in the chronology of dying and death here. And so after the soul has left, I don't even know if that's the right way to put it. I was going to say after the soul has left the enclosure of the body, but it seems like there was a bit of an in-between period, is there not? Like when physical death has occurred in Judaism, we have a shemira, like a guardian, a watcher that sits with the body between physical death and burial. Is that correct? Can you explain what's going on there?
Well, the way, as mentioned earlier, we often refer to the soul as a neshama, but technically there's actually 5 different names to a soul. It's called, the five names are referred to as nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yichida. Going in order in terms of what you could say, the bottom or part being the most connected to the physical body, and then the highest part being totally as if even when you're part of this world, it's not part of this physical body. So the lower levels referred to as nefesh, ruach, and neshama, or the nefesh and the ruach. So those are the parts that are most, let's say, connected to the physical world. Mm-hmm. And the way that it's taught is that when a person begins to pass away, those levels of nefesh, ruach, and even of neshama are sort of going above kind of the physical, leaving that physical body, that physical sense that we have. Something also interesting that was pointed out to me by a teacher is that when you're part of this world, the one person in this world that you never physically see with your physical eyes is yourself. You never see yourself. You look in a mirror, you see a reflection.
And so at that moment, is the soul kind of seeing the body? Is it out of the body?
Yeah, exactly.
So why do you have this other person? I'm saying that correctly, right? There's another person, typically a family member, not always, who is sitting by the body constantly, or maybe people in shifts between death and the burial. Why that guardianship?
Because even after the person passes away and there's no longer a life in the body, but we still believe that the soul is connected on some level. Mm-hmm. Some people call it as if it's hovering over the body. Mm-hmm. And having someone there, often also reciting, usually a shomer will say prayers as well, tehillim, psalms. It's meant to be somehow a comfort to that soul. Because it's referred to as kind of a little bit of an uncomfortable period of time for that lower level of the soul called the nefesh. Because, as mentioned earlier, like when your soul comes into the physical body, that's uncomfortable. But then you get used to the physical body, and like that part of the soul kind of gets feels at home in the body. Now it has to go back to leaving the physical world, and that's to be uncomfortable. It's like as if it's almost like a spiritual jet lag. You know, you've got to get used to a new reality with time. Once again, time and space is different. You're no longer connected to the things that you were connected to, and it's hard. So the different stages, like you say, there is a transition period, and it starts when the soul leaves the body, and then next step is the burial of the body, and then there's the Shiva period, and then there's the 30 days, and then there's the entire year.
Before we get there, and before our next break, I want to talk about in this transition period between the physical death and the burial, there's this tahara, that purification. There's a ritual immersion of the body in water, like in a mikveh. Why are we doing that? I mean, we do that in other moments in our life. Why do we do that at death?
Well, part of the practical parts of there's a lot of interesting things about that. Number one, we believe it's one of the principles of the Rambam's principles of Jewish faith. We believe that the body will rise again in the era called what's referred to as the Chiyas HaMesim, the revival of the dead. So one of the rituals is to prepare the body, even though the body will, rot away in the grave. There's still an aspect of the body that remains. So we prepare the body for that time period, as referred to as the revival of the dead, which sounds kind of strange and odd, but it is part of the Jewish law. Secondly, everybody's buried exactly in the same way. Like, there's no, in this world, obviously people have wealth, have material, have less material, less wealth. When a person is buried, everybody's meant to be buried the same, in the same shroud, nothing special. There's nothing, you don't put on the person's favorite baseball hat or suit or,
like
like
a simple white tunic.
The most simple, what's referred to as a shroud, tafresh in Hebrew. So it's meant to represent that in life that we do get invested in the physical world, but there's no longer a physical body, there's no longer physical needs, there's no more physical pleasures. It's a different reality.
Now, I think
part of the burial process.
I think my grandfather, in blessed memory, if I remember correctly, was buried with his talis as well, with his prayer shawl.
Well, that's different. You cover, yes, you can. You cover especially in the land of Israel where they don't use coffin. They cover the person in the talis. That's correct. They do that. And then, of course, there's the idea of going more mystical, that all these rituals, all these things that we do, comforting for that soul that is now on its journey out of the physical world. So these customs or these laws concerning whether it's how the body is handled, and also even how the people, the mourners, experience this period of time, is also comforting for the souls of the people who leave this world, and comforting to the souls of the people that are mourning. Not necessarily the tachresh, not the tahara, the washing of the body, but rather in terms of the mourning period and the shiva. These are all actually very comforting or meant to be comforting for the people who are experiencing grief.
Yeah, after we take our next break, I want to go through talk about the burial process and the mourning process, and I want to come back to this idea of comfort, which is so emphasized throughout at both sides of the coin, actually. When there's discomfort, calling it that, like you called the discomfort of the separation of the soul from the body. There are a lot of other words that a lot of other religions use around that, and I personally love the idea of discomfort and comfort. It puts it in a softer light that feels more resonant with the soul's journey. We're going to be back in a moment with Rabbi Yaakov Bankhalter, who's educating us and talking through the death rites and rituals in Judaism and their mystical meaning. We'll be right back.
Equal Footing with Dove Tusman is sponsored by MDCS Dermatology, your experts in skincare. With 2 Manhattan locations and 4 offices in Long Island, including Plainview and Commack, the dermatologists and skincare surgeons at MDCS are proud to be affiliated with the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and New York Presbyterian Hospital. So schedule your next skin exam in one of MDCS's convenient New York area locations. To make an appointment, go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-DERM. That's 212-661-3376. You can even schedule a virtual video visit with MDCS's board-certified dermatologists from the comfort and safety of your own home. So go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-3376. And don't forget to mention Equal Footing for 15% off all cosmetic procedures.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been told.
Hey, we're back on Equal Footing. Rabbi, I'll give you a special admiration if you could catch that deep musical reference right before the break. Did it sound familiar to you?
Oh, no, I didn't catch it.
I know we come from a similar musical era. It's called "In My Time of Dying." It's Led Zeppelin. In my time.
Of course.
Such a great. In my time of dying, want nobody to mourn. All I want for you to do is take.
I wasn't paying attention. I think I was. Of course, I love Led Zeppelin. Yeah, in my time of death, of course, that's right.
Yeah, and I think that actually I like that transition because it talks about dying easy and making sure that death is easy for those around us. And the burial itself, and I was at a Jewish burial today, I don't know if it's okay to use this adjective, is quite beautiful. There's a returning to the earth. Tell us in brief what happens at a Jewish burial and why.
Well, as you just said, the earth. So, go back to the story of creation of the first human being, Adam, and it says, and Adam is from the word Adama. Earth is Adama, and Adam his body was a product of the earth. And the neshama was blown into the body, into a dead body, actually, through his nose, through his nostrils. So the soul goes in through the nostrils, but the body comes in the earth. So the idea is that death is only relevant for the body, not for the soul. The soul doesn't die. The soul never dies. The soul is pure life, whereas the body does die. So the idea is that the body needs to be turned back to the earth, as so to speak, where it came from, and then the soul can have its journey back, so to speak, into the higher worlds. So the burial ceremony is, if anything, that's probably the essence of the ceremony, is recognizing that, number one, death is something that no matter how much influence you have in this world, no matter how powerful you are, no matter how wealthy you are, death is the ultimate equalizer. It really just equalizes everything for every human being. And that's why the blessing that we make is, we make a blessing, and it's Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, which means the judge of truth. And it's a moment of truth. Like, it just hits home. Hits home the truth. And so that's why it's painful in that moment. It's painful for us. Not because, in essence, that person is dead. It's because in our experience of this reality, it's painful. And Hashem understands that. And we are human beings living in this world. But, we also understand that a person's pure essence and pure life doesn't die. But for right now, in order for us to get to that higher reality and belief, we first need to mourn the pain. Because for right now, it's horrible. It's a tragedy. So in that moment, we deal with that. We don't ignore the pain of the human experience. It's real for the human being. I know it's not the truth of everything, but for right now, it hurts. And Hashem understands. It hurts for us as human beings. So we bury the dead in the earth. We bury the body in the earth. We put as participants, as Jewish participants in the ceremony, we actually put dirt on the grave. We're part of that process, each of us. And I've always wondered, in the beginning, often the first person, or even each person that goes putting earth or dirt in the grave, will turn the shovel upside down, like they're reluctant to do it. What's that about? We're very sensitive. Torah is very, maybe ultra sensitive to human psychology. So even though it seems like what's the difference? Just take the dirt and put it on there, but we believe that it matters. So we don't want to do it. We want to do it reluctantly. We want to be like, it hurts us to do this, but we have to. It's one of the greatest mitzvahs is to bury the dead. It's one of the greatest things a person can do. Is to, because
in a Jewish burial, in a halachically correct Jewish burial. Afterwards,
it's called Chesed Shel Emes. It's called the truthful, because you're not, theoretically, this person can't help you anymore. So you're not doing it for ulterior motives. This guy can't help you anymore.
Kindness.
Maybe in the higher world you can, but in the physical world, if you wanted to borrow some money from this guy, he's not going to be able to lend you any money right now. So it's called Chesed Shel Emes, which is the true act of kindness. And so we bury. So that's why, and it's very honorable that not strangers or people who are paid by the cemetery, but rather have his close people around him. When he's buried, and once the dirt is covering the grave, that's all that. Stage 2 or stage 3. The soul now has a certain degree left the body. once the dirt is covered.
I've read in certain places in Talmudic commentary that that's actually when the mourning begins. When the dirt is over the grave. And now we mourn for 7 days. Shiva literally comes from the word 7. What are we doing then? Can you walk us through what Shiva is about?
So there's two journeys. There's one that's for the soul that was part of the body. According to Jewish tradition, the soul now is actually hovering. Part of the soul, at least, is hovering in the home of the Shiva house. Actually, they're present.
And that's the home where the person who died
over the body is not moved to their home.
Is that the home of the place that the person who died lived?
Or either where they live or wherever they're sitting Shiva, wherever the people behind are sitting Shiva. Like they're somehow present in that place. Places. But again, it's not physical, so there can be two brothers or sisters that are sitting Shiva in different places. But yes. Now, for the people who are sitting Shiva, for them, they're also on a journey. Detaching. I mean, I don't want to. When I say detaching, what I mean is detaching from that person's physical experience and trying to maybe get more connected to that individual on a soulful experience.
Now, I want to talk about that term for just a minute. Sitting, and I want to also have the time to get to some listeners' questions and comments. And please, if you haven't already gotten the number, please feel free to write in. You can share your pain. You can talk about your experience of loss, questions you have around death. The number to send in a question or comment, we've gotten a number already, is 917-428-4062. That's 917-428-4062. We just had a caller on the line as well, I think, that may have accidentally dropped. The number to call in is 718-303-9090, just till the top of the hour. Now, sitting Shiva, as I was in the pregame research, I kind of went down this rabbit hole. Why is it called sitting Shiva? And some scholars cite the book of Job 2:13, where it relates that the arrival of Job's 3 friends to comfort him, it says, for 7 days and 7 nights they sat beside him on the ground. Now, he was still alive, just suffering, but others trace it to Samuel 13:31, in which King David is described as tearing his garments and laying himself on the ground in grief. And there are a number of references to 7 days. First of all, where does it come from in our tradition, the Shiva tradition, and why do we call it sitting Shiva?
Well, biblically, there's mitzvahs that have a biblical law, and then the rabbis added on rabbinically. So the biblical law is 1 day, which actually goes back to the story of Aaron and his sons who died in the temple. And it actually states there that they're not meant to partake in the service of the temple. They're supposed to sit back and refrain from work for that 1 day. But later on in traditional law and rabbinical law, they added on that it should be a full week. So biblically speaking, it's 1 day, but rabbinically it's 7 days. Because 7 days represents that cycle. First of all, why is it referred to as sitting? Basically because the person who is in Shiva is meant to sit on a low place, lower than all the people that are coming in and entering. That's why today they make more comfortable chairs that are meant to lower to the ground. So when people enter, it's very obvious who is the one who's mourning. And so that person's sitting on a lower chair, and the person who is coming to comfort them is in a higher place. So the visual you always see is the person, the mourner's either low to the ground or almost to the ground, or even on the ground sometimes, and the person who's coming in is comforting them on a higher place. And because Torah, even if you don't feel sad, let's say some people experience death in different ways. Some people are always totally broken, or some people are broken, whatever it is. Either way, we're meant to do it in the way the Torah describes, because human laws are meant to, especially these laws, they very much are in tune with human psychology, whether we're aware of it or not. And they help us.
There's a lot of debate both from through the prism of psychology and kind of the limits of grief and in healing from a psychotherapeutic perspective, but also from a Jewish wisdom and biblical perspective. I mean, Deuteronomy 14:1 and 2 says, "Do not cut yourselves or shave the front of your heads for the dead, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God out of all the peoples on the face of the earth. The Lord has chosen you to be his treasured possession." And then there's quotes from Rabbi Akiva. There's kind of a line of thought that we shouldn't mourn or grieve too much. But then, of course, so when we go to Shiva, when we go to sit Shiva with someone or the family, are we going to celebrate the life of the person we passed, or are we going to commiserate and share in the pain of the family? What is the attitude that we should go with?
I mean, the actual mitzvah is to comfort the mourner. So whatever comfort, you're there to make them happy, or make them, I don't know, happy maybe is not the right word, to make them feel comfortable. Because it's how we deal with pain. Everybody deals with trauma or pain in their own way. But generally speaking, human connection, human contact is the ultimate healing power. Even a person is sick, a person who comes in to visit them helps to heal the person who's living. So a person who is experiencing pain and suffering, just to mention, I myself sat together for my mother nearly 30 years ago. I was just out of college when it happened. It was a surprise. I didn't even know she was going. She didn't know. I didn't know she was going to pass away. And I sat Shiva, and I remember the week of Shiva it was extremely comforting. I mean, having people visit you and talk to you and telling stories, and you hear the same stories over and over again. It's every Shiva house. It's almost the same situation. Two people sitting down. You always find people laughing and joking and smiling. You very rarely find people, who are, crying. I mean, a tear comes out. You do celebrate the human life, and they tell you these stories about the loved one and how they did this and how they, one day they did that. It's very comforting. To be honest, the hardest part for me is the Shiva was over. It was back to normal life.
And that
was very painful.
When the Shiva is...
It was very comforting, and it was very uncomfortable having to leave the Shiva. And
are we meant to literally stop mourning after those 7 days and move on?
No. The mourning continues. There's different levels. We're meant to stop sitting Shiva after 7 days. We never want to go more than the Torah tells us to. If we do, then that's not healthy. And sometimes it could be somewhat egotistical, without necessarily. I don't mean to, begrudge or someone who is feeling sad. But don't forget, the soul wants the person they're leaving behind to be happy and move on with their life. So over mourning is not necessary. Is not.
I just had a flashback at some point. We've been on the show together over the years and talked about this kind of idea of over mourning. Let's fast forward a year after the passing to the first anniversary, the yahrzeit. And then we do that each year. So every anniversary of the passing of a loved one. What do we hold in our heart? What do we do, first of all, in the physical world on the yahrzeit, the anniversary of a loved one's death? And what should we hold in our heart? What's the more mystical meaning to it?
Well, especially on the yahrzeit and the following yahrzeit, we always try to, number one, go back to the memory of that individual, in my case, my mother, or whoever it is that person is remembering. We try and do always physical actions in their merit, and always say, listen, a soul moves on, a soul's still alive. That life, that person you love is dying there in another reality. But what they can't do is a physical favor or a physical mitzvah or an action in this world. So what we can do, if we're part of this physical world, what we can do is what they can't do, is that give charity, do a kindness for someone, do a physical deed for someone else, or do some physical action in the merit of that individual, because that's really...
I love that.
what the best thing that makes that soul so happy. So we bring to mind that person. We don't want to overmourn. We bring that,
I've also heard
we say
that
Kaddish, also the Kaddish, the candle, there's a custom that we just, on that day, and then they go on with their lives. And once again, that soul's like, I want you to be alive. I want you. If you're not married, I want you to get married. If you're not happy, I want you to be happy. And I want you to move on. I want you to live a happy life. That's what the soul wants from us.
And I also understand, or I've read that at the end of those 11 or 12 months, then the soul has also truly moved on. There isn't this in-between period.
Yes.
Is there something to that?
Yes. So there's 11 months where we're meant to say Kaddish for the soul. Exactly 11 from, you start Kaddish after the person is buried, and then you finish up until the month before they passed away. So that's exactly 11 months. Now, according to Jewish mysticism, a soul goes through their every moment of their lives in 11 months. Now, you might say, well, if a person lives in this world 75, 85, 90 years, how does 11 months? But once again, time is not the same as it is in this world as it is in higher worlds. During that process, that period of time when we say the Kaddish prayer, those 11 months, it's meant to be also a comfort for those 11 months. But when that is finished, the soul does become, so to speak, a little bit more removed. It does become entirely, actually, very much removed from the physical world, the physical body. There is an exception that is by very holy people, referred to as tzaddikim, very special tzaddikim. For them, they still are connected to their physical bodies, which is why there's a Jewish custom to pray at the grave site of a tzaddik any day of the year. Whereas, let's say, a normal person, let's say, you usually go visit on the yurt side because there's an idea that their soul comes back on the day, revisits their life one day of that year. And therefore you go to the... One of my
most impactful life memories is doing that with you for the first time at the grave of Rebbe Nachman Schneerson. And I encourage everyone to do that praying at the gravesite of a tzaddikim, especially of a tzaddik, I should say, especially if you're surrounded by so many other... the magic is also the experience, the communal experience of praying together in that moment. We have a couple of questions that we have many more than we're going to be able to get to, so I want to apologize to listeners who sent ones in that I'm not going to get to. But Manny from New Jersey asks about the idea of a eulogy, that his uncle, when he passed, specifically asked before that there not be a eulogy. And this was somewhat confusing to me. And then I have been to other funerals afterwards, particularly Hasidic funerals, even more particularly Lubavitch funerals, where there isn't a eulogy.
Right.
Why, Rabbi? Is it Jewish custom? Should we do a eulogy or should we not?
Well, Jewish custom, generally speaking, I can't speak for like old times. I don't know what the old Jewish custom was. I know most people today, they do eulogize. Family, if there's ever going to be another time when they have people surrounding the family, and whether it's the memorial home or wherever they are. Chabad, however, the custom in Chabad is not to eulogize until the 30th day. Chabad is very careful and sensitive to the fact because we do believe that the soul is in a state where it is a bit uncomfortable for the soul for that first state, and we feel that it's better for the soul when people are going to come forward and say all these things. It's better to actually finish their 30-day that time period of what the soul goes through. But it's more befitting in that moment because soul's in the middle of in the middle of a process, and it's maybe not ready. This is the Chabad perspective. If you go to a Chabad funeral, they just go there, they say prayers, they bury, and they all walk away, and they wait till the 30th day, because that's when the souls now maybe reached a certain level where it's more feasible, or it's more, it makes more sense to say those things.
There may be a similar through line around the answer to this other listener's question, but Mila asks a question about, I'll just read it directly. I have been crying for the lost hostages in Israel, even though I personally knew none of them. One of the things that I've been thinking about is, was their Jewish soul confused? What happens between death and the lack of a Jewish burial? How do we reconcile that afterwards? What can we do from afar to shepherd their soul?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, listen, look at all the people that died in the Holocaust in gas chambers, people who are I mean, there's a gazillion examples.
Is there something remedial that we can do after?
Who they never found his body in the World Trade Center, and, but we do believe that even, if you have the opportunity to bury someone, they should be buried properly. But if not, especially someone who is murdered for being Jewish, that their soul goes straight. They actually skip over the process that a normal soul would go through. I think the only comforting thing that we could try and get in touch with is that a person's, once again, their physical life is temporary, and their essence, soul essence, is pure light. And regardless of what happens to a person, we're all going to die, right? As you said, it's the most, natural thing. Not to say what happened this week wasn't the most horrible tragedy, and it was a terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy. And it continues to be a tragedy for those other hostages. But on the other hand, all we can do right now is just remember that that person's essence, soul, still remains totally intact. And also to know that we believe that every soul comes into this world and accepts upon themselves, before they're born, to go through what they're going to go through in this life. So as crazy as it sounds, and I don't mean to be to not be sensitive to the pain of the families and the pain of those people, what they went. I can't even imagine one day of what they went through. Let alone 300 some odd days.
That helps explain also, especially for non-Jews that may be listening, why there's such extraordinary focus on the returning of the bodies, even of those that we know we've lost.
Yeah, what do we do? We trade live criminals for dead bodies, because we do want, the famous Jewish spy, Eli Cohen, who was killed by the Syrians in the 60s, they're still trying to get his body back from the 1960s.
Rabbi Yaakov, you have a namesake Yaakov, who asks a question about this. He says, Dov, I've heard you talk before in the show about death consciousness and how that's been important in your spiritual journey. And for listeners, what that's about is the idea of being conscious of, I could die tomorrow. For me, personally, I'm speaking as Dov, that helps me live more fully. It reminds me of the Mahatma Gandhi saying, live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you were to live forever. Is that a Jewish concept? Question to the rabbi.
Yes.
And maybe we have to end with this one, because we just have less than a minute left.
As a matter of fact, it actually says it's something similar in Pirkei Avot and Ethics of the Fathers, that you should never take for granted that whether you'll be living tomorrow or not. You should do tshuva as if you're about to die every moment, or and every day. Does that mean at the same time you should live not in a happy way, but joyously? And of course not. It goes together. It's one of those opposing feelings that we're meant to live with, or that's part of life. That we never know. We never know what life's going to bring us tomorrow or the next moment. On the other hand, we have to be happy and thrive, because our joy is not coming from physical. We know that we, in our essence, and that's, I think, the main theme of death, is death is only for the body. What we love, what we miss, like what that person expressed earlier, someone brought this out, I read this week. Everyone is so gung-ho over these hostages, and no one even knows who they are. Yeah. But because it shows
Rabbi, we're going to be up on time.
Oh, no, we got to end it.
Thank
The
you,
human life
as
is the
always.
soul, and that's what we love, and that continues. It can't die. It can't die. It does not die.
Thank you.
Mama, take this badge off of me. I can't use it anymore. It's getting dark, too dark to see. I feel I'm knocking on heaven's door.